Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. It's Brian Wilson in with Katie Pavlich this morning. Larry O'Connor's taking some time to be with family. Be back soon. We are pleased to have on the line the Secretary of the State Board of Elections for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Donald Palmer. Mr. Palmer, thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. I don't know if you've been following what we've been doing over here, but we had a poll watcher by the name of Dara Fox, who came on here and told us some pretty amazing and surprising things. And when we put her on the air and interviewed her and asked her a few questions, we were overwhelmed, sir, with emails from people who said, I saw similar things, or they recounted different things that they saw, which raises in our minds whether or not the vote in Virginia was fair and that there was voter integrity in all cases. And so I just wonder, you are the person sort of in charge of the Board of Education. The Attorney General tells us he can't really enter the fray until you guys ask him to. Where are we on some of these things that have been raised? Are you asking the Attorney General to get involved?
Well, Brian, thanks for having me. I just to take your question, and try to answer it. Obviously, I'm not sure the details of that particular poll watcher and what jurisdiction they were in, but, the poll watcher plays a valuable role because they represent the political parties inside the polling place. The poll workers and the chief in charge in that polling place, they take oaths to uphold the laws of the Commonwealth, particularly the election laws. And when there is a violation of any sort of irregularity, that is something that the local electoral board and the State Board of Elections, as our board, take very seriously to have the state police investigate if there's something of that sort. The disclosure and sort of the sunshine of having the political parties there means that they're reporting to the political parties, and when an issue arises where perhaps a poll worker isn't following guidelines that are provided by the state, that should go to the local electoral board for them to investigate. And that has happened across the Commonwealth when there have been some sort of irregularities or some variance from the statutes, where the local electoral board will investigate and refer that to the state police or the local Commonwealth.
All right, but in some of these cases, Mr. Palmer, what we had was a situation where, like, for example, Dara Fox told us how people would come and they'd get in line and they couldn't even say where they lived, and yet they were allowed to vote. And then some cases, and she said this happened many, many times at the polling place that she was at, where she went to check somebody off the list who had been cleared to vote and found that they had already voted, and yet they weren't stopped. They were not given a provisional ballot. They were simply allowed to vote. And when they called it in, they were told, oh, yeah, that's happening a lot. We don't know what that's all about. That's not right.
Well,
doesn't that concern you?
Yeah. It does concern me because the state law requires that and it's an unfortunate incident at times, if someone's vote is diluted by someone illegally voting for them. But the fact of the matter is if that happens, state law has a provision that that person should vote provisionally. And that's an example where the local electoral board does investigate. They get with their local Commonwealth attorney, and they have to make a decision by the provisional ballot deadline whether or not to count that ballot for the individual whose vote was taken away. If that actually, if that occurred, the proper thing for poll watchers to do, or citizens who see or hear what they believe is an incident, they should report it to the local electoral board because they take this thing very seriously. And investigations in election crimes on a local level are really handled, for the most part, by the local Commonwealth attorney because that's where election crimes are prosecuted.
Excuse me, but don't you have an obligation as the Secretary of the State Board of Elections, when you hear stories like that and you're not getting any word from the local boards of election, to get involved? I mean, aren't you ultimately responsible for integrity of the ballot in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Yes, I think that the way I see it is that we have an election to run. There's always going to be, some folks who want to test the system for irregularities that we may hear about. That's why we have the chiefs in the polling places. That's why we have a system where if an election crime is alleged, we actually have a system of investigation and prosecution. And, I have a staff of 35 people. We have 2,000 polling places across the Commonwealth. It's something that we have to rely upon our local electoral boards, and it's a system that's worked where if an issue has arisen, they have an obligation and a duty to bring it to the attention of the local electoral board because they're the closest to the problem. If there's an issue going on in a particular polling place that really should be handled in that polling place by the local general registrar and the local electoral board. From our perspective of the state board, when there's an issue that involves multiple counties, we're getting multiple reports of crimes that may involve multiple players. That's sort of when the state board of election gets involved with the attorney general's office. And I can tell you that we have the job of administering the elections. When we receive any evidence of sort of irregularities with absentee fraud or some sort of at the polling place irregularities, we immediately respond to that, working with the jurisdiction. I would just remind the listeners that 99% of all election crimes are going to be handled at the local level. It's only those that sort of have an interest with the Commonwealth as a whole, multiple counties involved, where the state board would get involved in conjunction with the Attorney General's office.
So we're talking about a presidential election here. So therefore, it does involve the entire state of Virginia and multiple counties, multiple callers coming in from different counties and different precincts reporting incidents of irregularity, possible voter fraud. So does your office have any intention of bringing in the Attorney General at any point moving forward? I know you just talked about how the local level usually deals with it, but we are talking about the presidential election here.
Well, obviously the presidential election gives an opportunity, after the fact to sort of say, hey, how can we do things better? And, for example, this one poll watcher that you're discussing, we've had individuals come to the state board and provide evidence to us, and then we react to that. We'll get the Attorney General's office involved or the state police.
Yeah.
I would like to hear from the individual personally.
Well, we can arrange that. I can promise you we can put you together. But, here's the frustration that I'm feeling as somebody who sits back as an observer. Look, it was a close election. If you were able to put 100, illegal votes into the system in every polling place, you can turn the course of a very close election very easily. And what I hear from the Attorney General, well, the State Board of Elections has to get involved. And what I'm hearing from you is, well, no, it's the County Board of Elections that have to get involved. Mm-hmm. Everybody's pointing their finger, but what is happening is that we're getting some real anecdotal evidence that something didn't go right on Election Day. And I don't hear a great deal of interest in trying to figure out what happened.
Well, I think that, I would disagree to just some extent that, whenever we have any indication that there's an irregularity, our job really is to administer the election. Our job is to enforce the laws and detect any sort of irregularities, and then allow those trained criminal investigators to investigate. And that's what they do. I just didn't receive those reports. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not something that we could do after the fact, obviously, with affidavits or the individual speaking to the State Board of Elections or the local electoral board. But it's going to take some sort of tangible evidence, beyond an individual cases.
Right. So,
very
so you just said that your job is to enforce the law, and we've had multiple poll watchers call in and talk about how people who weren't 18 yet were able to vote. And in Virginia, you have to have some form of voter identification. So, would you say that maybe you should investigate the lack of these polling places enforcing the law in terms of ID?
I mean, a lot of times it was raised by the poll watcher, and they were overruled
by election officials, which seems like something that you should probably be looking into.
And we will. If we get reports of that, we will look into that. I mean, it's really a top-down system. We provide, on the voter ID law, for example, we provided training on how to administer that correctly, and then that training obviously went down to the poll workers. And so they take their job seriously to administer the laws as written.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're way out of time, Mr. Palmer. You seem like a decent man. I hope that you're good for your word, and if we give you some evidence and put you in touch with these people, that you will take the moment to look at it. Sadly, that's all the time we have for the conversation, but we'd love to have you back and find out what you thought once we provide those names to you.